Have you ever been part of one of those um, late night conversations that starts with something incredibly mundane, like, I don't know, complaining about the paper straws at a local diner?
Are absolutely. And then somehow,
Right. Somehow, like an hour later, you find yourself earnestly dissecting the complex logistical challenges of mobster executions.
yes, exactly. You know the exact kind of chat.
You really do. You look at the clock, you look at your friend across the table, and you just wonder, how on earth do we get from point A to point Z?
It's a universally recognizable human experience, honestly. We're talking about the unfiltered stream of consciousness here.
Exact.
It's the rawest form of associative thinking. It's where the brain just, abandons any pretense of a structured agenda, takes the leash off, and follows the dopamine of weird tangential connections.
And that is the absolute perfect setup for our mission today, because the sources we are looking at provide a fascinating, completely unedited glimpse into extreme associative thinking.
Oh, extreme is definitely the right word for it.
It really is. Today, we're doing a deep dive into a recorded conversation between two guys, John Mott and William Bruner.
Right, and Bruner is actually the author of a book called The Book of Mott, right?
Yep, that's him. And the audio we're analyzing today is quite literally billed as the ramblings from the mind of John Mott.
Which is a highly, highly accurate title, as we will soon discover.
Oh, for sure.
What makes this deep dive so compelling is that we aren't analyzing like a peer-reviewed academic paper today.
Right. No textbooks here.
Exactly. And we aren't dissecting some carefully curated historical document. We are looking at raw, unvarnished audio where two guys just jump wildly between seemingly unrelated topics.
It is an absolute wild ride. I mean, listening to this audio for the first time, to you listening at home, it was like watching a conversational pinball machine.
A pinball machine. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, like the topic just keeps bouncing off the bumpers in the weirdest possible directions.
But here is where we need to dig a little deeper than just marveling at the randomness of it all.
Okay, lay it on us.
My goal today is to map that absurd architecture. I don't just want to list the weird things they talk about.
Right.
I want to analyze exactly how and why the human mind connects these impossible dots. We are going to look at the cognitive science behind these leaps.
So tracing the logic, basically.
Exactly. Tracing the logic from environmental policy all the way to true crime to understand how the brain uses absurdity and associative leaps to process reality and, well, anxiety.
I love that framing because the very beginning of this recording is so perfectly authentic, but it doesn't seem deeply psychological at first glance.
Not at all.
No, it starts the way literally every digital meeting of the modern era starts, just awkwardly trying to figure out if the computer is actually recording.
Oh, yeah. Is it recording on your end? It's not showing on mine.
Literally exactly that. The universal mundane prologue to any modern human interaction.
Right. But then, with almost zero runway, Mott just takes off.
He really does.
He goes straight from "Are we recording?" into this grand, unified theory about the origins of COVID.
Yes. And the material he uses to build this theory are, apparently, environmentalists and cruise ship beverage accessories.
It's quite the leap.
It is. And, just to be completely clear to you, the listener, we aren't here to validate Mott's epidemiology or his politics.
No, absolutely not.
The science of public health definitely does not trace back to strawberry straws. We are neutrally reporting his theory here, and we're not endorsing his viewpoints on environmentalists or the pandemic.
Right. But what we are interested in is the sheer, Olympic-level mental gymnastics required to make that connection.
The cognitive leaps.
Exactly. We are observing the cognitive leaps. And what we are seeing here is a perfect real-world example of what we call the availability heuristic.
Okay, unpack that for us.
So the human brain absolutely hates a vacuum of information, especially regarding massive disruptive global events like a pandemic.
Right, it makes us uncomfortable not knowing.
It's exactly. When faced with chaos, the brain desperately searches for causality. And how does it do that? It grabs the nearest, most salient memories or frustrations it has lying around and forces them to fit together.
And the logic chain he builds to force those pieces together is just incredible. So, Mott starts with the environmentalists who said, we need to get rid of plastic straws to save the ocean turtles.
We all remember that massive cultural shift.
Yeah, but Mott takes us to a highly specific environment: cruise ships.
Of course he does.
He notes that on cruises, they replaced plastic with edible sugar-based straws. And he gets very specific about the flavor profiling, like if you order a strawberry daiquiri, they give you a strawberry straw. A chocolate chick gets a chocolate straw.
Which, on paper sounds like a pleasant, slightly gimmicky solution to a major ecological problem.
Right, until you actually try to use one for 20 minutes by the pool.
Yeah, that changes things.
Because Mott points out the fatal flaw in the edible straw ecosystem. They get incredibly slimy. Because they are made of sugar, they start dissolving directly into your drink. So people get frustrated, the straws get gross, and the cruise ship population just abandons them entirely.
It's okay, so they stop using the straws.
Exactly. Instead of using the slimy utensils, people start putting their mouths directly on the cups, the glasses, and, in Mott's words, putting our mouth on everything.
And that is his leap.
Yes, and that, he concludes, is how the virus actually spread.
Wow.
I have to ask, though, wait, so Mott's argument is that an attempt to make the ocean more sanitary actually made human beings completely unsanitary.
Precisely. It is his ultimate expression of the law of unintended consequences.
That is wild.
But look at the cognitive mechanism here. He has taken a global, invisible threat, a virus, and anchored it to a highly tactile, frustrating personal experience.
A dissolving, slimy sugar straw on a vacation.
Exactly. It makes the incomprehensible pandemic feel tangible and solvable in his mind. He draws a direct, unbroken line from saving a sea turtle to a global lockdown.
And that thematic link, the sea turtle, is what propels us into the next phase of the conversation.
Naturally.
Because if the entire global population made this massive sacrifice, enduring these slimy sugar tubes, and consequently plunging into a pandemic all to save the turtles, well, the natural associative step is to ask, how did the turtles repay us?
This is where we see the psychological concept of reciprocity come into play.
Right.
Even when human beings are doing something for nature, for an abstract ecological good, there's this weird underlying psychological desire for the beneficiary of our actions to acknowledge the sacrifice.
We want a thank you note from the turtles.
Basically, yes.
And according to Mott, the turtles absolutely failed the gratitude test. He says they, quote, didn't reciprocate.
Right.
When humanity was suffering through lockdowns, what did the turtles do? They self-quarantined in their shells.
He implies a level of malicious compliance on the part of the turtles. Like, he claims they knew exactly what they were doing.
Okay, I hear you explaining the psychology here, but I have to push back a little.
Sure.
Is this actually associative thinking, or is this just two guys trying to entertain each other by being deliberately absurd?
That's a fair point.
How do we tell the difference when the conversation takes a turn into pure surrealist comedy? Because Mott claims that while these turtles were safely tucked away in their shells, avoiding the pandemic, they were just sitting there muttering slightly racist tones about everyone.
It's a great question. And the answer is that it's actually a bit of both.
Okay.
Yes, they are riffing, but the way they riff follows a strict psychological blueprint called semantic network theory.
Semantic network theory.
Right. Think of associative memory, like a game of 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, or clicking through Wikipedia links.
Oh, I've done that. You start on the page for coffee and end up on the French Revolution.
Exactly.
No.
In Mott's brain, the turtle node is activated. That connects to hiding in a shell, which connects to isolation.
Okay, I follow that. But how do we get to racist turtles? And again, just a reminder to the listener, we're neutrally reporting Mott's absolutely unhinged personification of aquatic reptiles here. We are definitely not endorsing the commentary.
Of course.
Yeah.
And we get there through anthropomorphism as a coping mechanism.
Oh, okay.
He's projecting, think about the cultural climate of the lockdowns. It was a time of intense isolation, generational divides, and grumpy neighbors stuck in their houses.
That's very true.
Mott takes all the claustrophobia and societal friction of the human experience and literally stuffs it into a turtle shell. He's dressing up our subconscious anxieties in ridiculous costumes to make them easier to process.
That makes a lot of sense, especially when you look at how William Bruner reacts to this.
Right, he doesn't shut it down.
No, he doesn't challenge the premise at all. He doesn't say, John, turtles lack the cognitive capacity for prejudice. He leans entirely into the world building.
Yes.
He asks, which turtles are more racist, the hard-shelled or soft-shelled ones?
Exactly. He accepts the parameters of this absurd projection and asks for further classification.
And Mott's semantic network fires off an immediate answer. He concludes it's the hard-shelled turtles.
And his reasoning is fascinating.
It really is. He says it's because they are older. He paints this vivid picture of ancient, hard-shelled turtles acting like it's 40 to 60 years ago.
Oh, right.
They are making remarks they could have gotten away with decades ago, but now, quote, they don't know better. He essentially turns a Galapagos tortoise into that one grumpy uncle at Thanksgiving who hasn't updated his worldview since 1982.
It perfectly illustrates how the brain uses dark humor to domesticate complex social frustrations.
From there, the conversation briefly touches on the culinary aspect of turtles. They bring up turtle soup.
A natural down.
Mott muses that turtles probably aren't big fans of the dish and notes that Dr. Seuss's Yertle the Turtle is probably their hero, though he doubts Yertle was really looking out for the other turtles.
And that brief culinary detour is the thematic hinge we need. That shift from turtles to the concept of eating animals isn't just random. It represents a psychological transition. They mention how feeding eggs back to animals is technically cannibalistic.
Which is a slightly unsettling thought.
It is.
Yeah.
And it flips a switch in the conversation.
Right.
They move from external anxieties like the pandemic and societal divides to the most visceral, primal fear a human can have.
Which is?
Being consumed.
Oh, wow. Yes. Because if we are casually talking about humans eating animals and animals eating animal products, the brain naturally explores the darkest possible inversion of that food chain.
Precisely.
What happens when the animals eat us? And just like that, we leave the ocean and arrive at the farm. Specifically, a pig farm.
Pigs are opportunistic omnivores with incredibly strong jaws. It's a well-documented, albeit macabre, reality that they can and will consume entire human body.
The speakers note this. They mentioned they recently learned from TV shows and reading that pigs are excellent body deterrents.
Right.
But they don't just leave it as clinical true crime trivia. This abstract fact instantly unlocks a deeply personal, terrifying autobiographical memory for one of the speakers.
This card is intense.
It is. He tells this story about growing up. A couple of farms over, there was a pig farm. His dad went over to feed the pigs, and he was there watching. The dad is carrying a bucket of feed, walking along the muddy hillside of the pen. Suddenly, he drops the bucket, slips in the mud, and slides right down into the pen with the pigs.
This is where the brain does something truly fascinating with trauma and memory. The abstract concept of pigs eating bodies acts as a skeleton key, unlocking this visceral memory.
Visceral is the perfect word. The speaker says his dad started screaming in absolute terror. He genuinely believed that one of the pigs had bitten him.
Wow.
In that moment, slipping in the mud, this grown man was completely terrified that he was going to be eaten alive right then and there.
It completely shatters the pastoral illusion of farm life. We view these animals as docile components of our food supply.
Right, like Old MacDonald.
Exactly. But in that slippery moment in the mud, the hierarchy of predator and prey was completely upended.
Let me ask you this directly. Have you ever looked at a harmless farm animal and suddenly realized that, given the right circumstances, you are technically on their menu?
It certainly changes the dynamic of a petting zoo, doesn't it?
It really does. And what happens next in the audio is a perfect example of what you mentioned earlier about humor as a coping mechanism.
Oh, yeah.
They take this genuinely horrifying childhood memory of a father almost being eaten, and they immediately diffuse the tension by turning it into a joke about the cyclical nature of consumption.
Right.
They wonder how many pieces of breakfast bacon out there might actually be, quote, fueled by another person.
It is a brilliant example of cognitive dissonance resolution.
That's a good term for it.
The brain cannot comfortably hold the idea of the beloved breakfast meat and the terrifying man-eating predator at the same time. So it bridges the gap with a morbid joke.
Fueled by another person. Built and designed by a person. It's such a dark thought. But the associative chain is still pulling them forward.
Always forward.
Because once you establish the premise that pigs are excellent at completely disposing of human remains, the brain seeks a practical application for that data.
Of course.
The conversation veers straight out of agricultural horror and into the logistics of actual true crime and missing persons.
Which is a completely frictionless transition if you look at how human curiosity operates. We love to apply theoretical horror to real-world mysteries.
Exactly. They bring up the Springfield 3.
Right.
For context, this is a real, highly publicized missing persons case where 3 women vanished from a home in Springfield, Missouri in 1992. It remains unsolved.
And Mott and Bruner start casually weighing theories on their disappearance using the exact data points they just discussed.
They do. They ask, were the Springfield 3 fed to a local pig farm? Or does the truth lie in another common urban legend regarding body disposal?
And this is where the brain utilizes another heuristic, tool-blending cinematic tropes with mundane reality.
Right, they pivot to the alternative theory that the bodies were buried under a parking garage. But they don't just say a parking garage.
They get specific.
Incredibly hyper-specific about the geography. They talk about a parking garage on the south side of town, specifically at Mercy Hospital on Sunshine Street.
Wow.
They note it was being built around the time of the disappearances and mention that a, quote, little imaging thing, likely ground-penetrating radar, was used to search the concrete there.
This grounds the grand, dramatic mafia trope of being buried in wet concrete into something hyper-local and tangible. It's no longer a movie plot. It's the hospital down the street on Sunshine.
But I love that Mott actually has a moment of profound self-reflection here.
He does.
He considers the actual mechanics of pulling off that movie plot. He realizes that casually burying someone in concrete at a bustling, open construction site isn't exactly easy.
Right. Logistically, it's a nightmare.
He confesses he just doesn't have the, quote, certain set of skills required to do it. He admits that kind of seamless cover-up probably only happens in the movies.
It's a moment where logic briefly interrupts the associative freefall. He recognizes the massive logistical chasm between Hollywood fiction and executing a complex crime.
But Brunner, playing the role of the ultimate conversational catalyst, refuses to let the mobster trope die.
He keeps it going.
He just scales it down. He pivots from the grand scale of an entire construction site to the intimate, personal scale of a classic mafia execution method.
Oh boy.
Brunner casually chimes in and states that while he has never given someone concrete shoes, he thinks it would be enjoyable.
A remarkably casual, almost polite way to describe premeditated murder.
It is so casual, and instead of discussing the horror or the morality of concrete shoes, the psychological buffer kicks in again.
Right, back to the humor.
They completely trivialize the macabre by devolving into an absurd debate about the ergonomics of the concrete shoes.
They focus entirely on the user experience of the murder weapon. This is the ultimate peak of their associative absurdity.
It really is. They imagine a scenario where you're the victim, the mobsters have just poured the cement around your feet, and instead of begging for your life, you start complaining about the fit.
Just complaining.
You know, saying, hey, these are a little too loose. These are pinching a bit right here. I really should have told you guys I'm 11 or maybe a 10.5 wide.
They have taken a situation of ultimate peril impending death by drowning at the hands of organized crime and applied the incredibly mundane consumer complaints of a suburban shoe store fitting room.
This is what I meant when I said earlier that I love watching this dynamic unfold. It is the ultimate armchair detective moment.
It really is.
They completely bypass the tragedy of a missing persons case. They skip right over the terror of the mafia, and they go straight to leaving a 1-star Yelp review for the arch support of a concrete shoe.
And they eventually reach the only logical conclusion to this ridiculous scenario.
Which is,
the comfort of the shoe probably doesn't matter much. As they note, when you are actively sinking to the bottom of the ocean, you probably aren't too worried about whether the cement pinches your toes.
the ultimate perspective shift.
Yeah.
The impending doom of drowning really puts a poorly fitting shoe into context. And right after they solve that highly specific dilemma, they check the time, realize they've been rambling long enough, and gracefully stop the recording.
It is an abrupt yet entirely fitting ending to a completely unstructured psychological journey.
Let's just take a breath and recap the insane trajectory of this deep dive. In the span of a single short conversation, we watched the human brain use availability heuristics to blame cruise ship strawberry straws for causing a global pandemic.
Right.
From there, semantic networks connected us to the racist grumblings of hard-shelled turtles self-quarantining in the ocean.
Then, the thematic hinge of turtle soup vaulted us into the ethics of cannibalistic animal feed, which dropped us straight into a visceral childhood memory of a terrified father in a muddy pig pen.
Which forced us to use dark humor to question the origin of our breakfast bacon, leading us to apply cinematic true crime tropes to the real-world mystery of the Springfield Three.
Before finally ending up debating the proper sizing chart for a pair of mobster concrete shoes.
If we connect all of this back to the broader picture of how we all think, it is a brilliant reminder that human conversation is rarely a straight line.
No, it's a complex web of associations.
Exactly. We use humor, absurdity, projection, and whatever random facts are floating in our recent memory to navigate complex fears, global anxieties, and our own history.
It really shows that you shouldn't take your own stream of consciousness too seriously.
Definitely not.
Sometimes the absolute most entertaining insights come from just taking the leash off your mind and letting it wander through the weirdest, darkest neighborhoods of your memory.
It's a valuable exercise in letting go of structure and observing where the underlying currents of your own psychology take you.
I agree completely.
So I want to leave you, the listener, with a challenge for this week. The next time you are hanging out with a friend, maybe grabbing a coffee, and you're having a casual, unstructured chat, suddenly stop.
Hit pause.
Hit pause on the conversation and try to trace your current topic back to what you were talking about exactly 10 minutes prior.
Try to find the exact conversational breadcrumbs, those semantic links that led you from point A to point Z.
You might just find that your own leaps in logic are every bit as wild, unpredictable, and hilarious as the ramblings of John Mott.
I bet you will.
And when you do finally trace that path back, I want you to ask yourself this.
What's the question?
Are our most brilliant, creative ideas just the result of our brains beautifully malfunctioning in these exact same ways? If John Mott's brain can seamlessly connect a sea turtle to a global pandemic, what impossible problems could you solve if you completely took the leash off your own logic? Until next time, keep diving deep.